Defensively, we executed.
GA, the easy thing is to talk about the monster stat line, including the career high with 6 blocks or the 7 assists. But more interesting there was the body language. Robert Covington, Karl Anthony Towns, hugging. There seems to be a lot of chemistry between the two, and that's what was missing in Minnesota. How important is that for them going forward and just seeing that small moment between those two?
I think ultimately it's going to be whether or not Karl Anthony Towns is ready to play the way he played tonight, more consistent. And he's been better individually, no doubt about it, since the trade. Covington has really been solid for them as well. But it's going to be more a matter, is this going to be a playoff team? I like the fact that he was more active. Like, that's the issue. And listen, I do think that was part of the issue that maybe Jimmy Butler had, because Jimmy Butler knows how talented Karl Anthony Towns is. But the question was he playing up to his potential on a consistent basis? And I think that was a big concern. When you look at the two guys Jimmy Butler's playing with now, I don't think there's any question that those two guys are better at this stage than Towns and Wiggins are. And they're in the Eastern Conference, which probably
and Embiid and Simmons.
Yes. And so I think for Karl Anthony Towns, and I like how he's responded to it, he's playing at a level now where he's getting back to potentially being an all-star, and he's going to have to be if this team has any chance of making the postseason.
Well, to add to that, I mean, you talked about his body language, and those were two guys in that interview that benefited heavily from this trade. And Covington coming over and kind of filling that 3D role, shooting the heck out of the ball this season. But in Towns and the way they're using him within the offense, it seemed like he never figured out what to do when Jimmy Butler had the ball. And, obviously his point per game are up 2 points. And, he's playing defense. That was a huge question mark as well. And, you just see him playing with passion. But, GA, to your point, he has to play consistent. And I think in doing this trade, a lot falls on Wiggins and Towns. Tibbs did this trade, and, it's no secret. I mean, Tibbs isn't guaranteed for next year. So this is huge. This is a huge season going forward for the entire organization.
Looking at Minnesota, and we know how Tom Thibodeau is when he has his guys, they stay in rotation, they play heavy minutes. Robert Covington clearly there, but Dario Saric, looking at it, 19 minutes for him. Here's a guy in Philadelphia that had a bigger role, kind of having a smaller role in Minnesota. What are you looking for from Saric to see if he's going to be successful there or maybe needs to go somewhere else?
Well, he's 24 years old, and, Tibbs plays his guys, you're right. But at the same time, the NBA is always in need of a stretch shooter that can play the type of role that he did and played for the Sixers last year. So I look for, as the offense and the season continues, them to get him more minutes and him be able to fit in within the offense a little bit better.
It's going to be interesting to see because, if you go back to his second year, he averaged almost 15 points a game, so you thought he would trend. But he's actually went the other way.
Yeah.
The shooting from three, not as good the last couple seasons. Defensively, still a bit of an issue. And he's not a guy, and that's why the postseason is so important, because the postseason really shows us who you are. You're going to play against a team potentially 7 times. They're going to game plan you. They know your tendencies. And he struggled mightily last season. And so that's probably partly why you don't see the minutes growing in Minnesota yet, because he hasn't quite figured out how to have more of an impact on the game, whereas Covington has. And so I do think in order for him to earn Tibbs' trust, he's going to have to play better because he has not been great this year, whether it was in Philadelphia or in Minnesota.
Speaking of that former team, the Philadelphia 76ers paying a visit to the Portland. Russell Westbrook gets the look in the corner for the win, 4 for 22 from the field, 0 for 8 from three-point range. In Dallas, they win their second game in the last 9 tries, getting some clutch plays from Luka Doncic, DeAndre Jordan, and Dennis Smith. That's a growth victory for them.
Absolutely. And listen, they have been really good at home. They're having struggles right now closing these kinds of games out on the road. And so that's going to be the next step. I really feel like this team could be a playoff team this year. I mean, no Wesley Matthews tonight, who's obviously going to be a big part of what they do. Harrison Barnes, he's proven that he can score. Luka Doncic has shown you that he is their best player. So they're going to have a chance, I think, to make the postseason. They're going to be in that conversation. When you look at those teams anywhere from 6 to 12, and if I'm Dallas, I feel like we're every bit as good. And why can't we get there? And bringing over DeAndre Jordan also is paying big dividends.
I think it also says a lot that your best player on your team is a rookie. And a lot of times it takes a team a long time to adjust to a player coming in that young being the best player. And you see players like Harrison Barnes, you see Dennis Smith Jr. sacrificing their game a little bit and playing off of Doncic. And you don't see that a lot in terms of, obviously the caliber of player that Luka, he commands it. But I do agree with you. I think they'll figure things out on the road, and they are going to be in the playoffs.
They've got the worst road record in the entire league, 2-15. And to your point, the thing that makes it great for them is he's earned it. Like, they respect his ability because they see it every day in practice. And you know how it is when that's where it starts in practice, when you're out there with a guy, when you see his grasp of the game and how he plays it, his understanding of it. He's not your typical rookie. He is age-wise, but those 3 years he spent as a professional overseas have paid huge dividends for him and that Mavericks franchise.
And certainly for Dallas, they know, okay, Luka's going to get the ball in clutch situations, and you saw it pay off there. Dennis Smith Jr. looking around for Luka, gets a wide-open layup at the end of that game. But for OKC, they got two looks. Paul George, probably the better quality look. Russ Westbrook, relatively open in the corner as well. Your two best players get those shots you want.
Well, in terms of Paul George, obviously playing against a smaller defender, gets to a spot. He's known for knocking down that elbow jump shot 8 or 9 out of 10 times. So I don't have a problem with that. They changed up their set a little bit after the timeout, got Russell a look in the corner, but obviously with him shooting 4 for 22 from the field, Russell's the type of player where that shot goes in just because he's Russell Westbrook and he's going to continue to hunt those shots, and he usually finds his rhythm towards the end of the game. But, they've won 10 road games this season, leads the league in road wins this season, and they've picked up defensively. So, OKC is going to be extremely scary in the playoffs.
Yeah, but to me, they lost this game. Their two best players both had a critical turnover down the stretch of that game. Paul George had the turnover off the crossover in traffic, and then Westbrook with trying to find George coming off that screen over the top, threw the ball away. Those are two live ball turnovers that Dallas was able to convert and score. And those are the plays you can't have, especially on the road in that kind of environment. So they're going to kick themselves more for those missed opportunities and the fact that they were able to give up points in transition on the other end.
Winning on the road so hard around the NBA, and Philadelphia 76 Simmons is averaging 16 points, 9 rebounds, 8 assists this season. First overall pick of the 2016 draft. Will lead his 76ers against the Portland Trail Blazers tonight at 9. With that, let's welcome in the 76ers point guard. Ben, before the season, you said that you wanted to make sure you mastered your scoring around the rim, that you weren't going to attempt three-point shots until you did that. Well, you still haven't taken one this season, shooting 62% from the floor in the month of December. What is the number you're looking for before you start taking those three-point shots?
I think just getting comfortable with my game and evolving over time. And it starts, day by day. It's not something that I'm just going to jump into and start doing. I'm going to get there over time. I've been working every day, working hard and getting everything right and trying to get better and just trying to lead this team.
Joel Embiid has talked about how soccer contributed to his ability to move as a big man in this league and move well. Obviously, at your size, your ability, 6'10", handle the ball, see the floor, move up and down the court like a guard. What do you think contributed to your ability to be able to do that?
I have no idea. I think maybe playing Australian football, I have no idea. I think just as a kid, my dad used to tell me to dribble the ball. And being a 6'10", point guard, point forward, whatever you call it, has its advantages, as you can see. But, I've always been comfortable doing that ever since I was a kid.
Hey, Ben, first, I want to congratulate you and commend you on the fact that you didn't allow the game to pressure you to try to do things that you don't do well at this stage. And you understood who you are as a player. And right now, your best way to impact the game is by dominating the paint. So, but knowing that, did you feel any pressure when you came into the league that that maybe you had to think about trying to add that to your repertoire, or were you always comfortable in knowing, you know what, I'll get to that at some point. Let me establish who I am, my identity as a player now, and worry about that later?
For me, you know, it was kind of tough towards the end of the season. You know, I'd hear all these things about shooting the ball, things like that. But for me, I took a step back and looked at, you know, what I was averaging, you know, how our team went, how my first season went. And I think we went very well. I think my season that I played was pretty, you know, if you look at the accolades and stats that I had as an individual player, they were great. And I know I'm going to get to that level. It takes a lot of time, work, dedication, all of that. But for me, I think it's just playing the game, having fun, and trying to evolve and not worrying about the outside noise.
You know, and we have footage of you. I know you work on the three-point shot, and you're going to continue to put the time in there. But again, to your point, most young players, they tend to focus on their weakness and play to their weakness. You were unique in that regard, in my estimation, by coming in and understanding why you were the first pick. They didn't draft you to shoot threes. You weren't the first pick because of that.
Right.
You were the first pick because of all those other attributes that your game has displayed over this year and a half that you've been playing the game. So from a coaching standpoint, your coaching staff, do they talk to you about that aspect of it, or do they want you to continue to be who you are and grow in that area? Because you can still improve, even though you've got gaudy numbers, there's still a lot of areas that you can improve in that I'm sure you realize what happened to you guys in the postseason last year.
100%. I think it comes down to just time. You know, this is my second year playing. So for me, I'm not, you know, forcing anything. It's going to happen over time. I'm going to continue to get better. You know, coaches do want me to take more shots. And I think, you know, that's one of the things that I've always looked at as, you know, I don't want to be the selfish guy on my team. But I understand, you know, if it's going to help the team get better, then I'm willing to do that. And yeah, I think, you know, the way our team plays is we love to share the ball and make the right plays. And I'm always, you know, that guy who wants to make the right play.
Certainly doing that, averaging almost a triple-double in just your second year in the league, and 17 career triple-doubles so far in just your second year. Ben Simmons, appreciate your time. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
G.A., you raise a great point. A lot of times when players come to the league, especially a #1 overall pick, we start picking at the things that they don't do well, right, Candace? And you look at what Ben Simmons is doing right now in his second year, once again, almost averaging a triple-double. Just 1 assist, 2 assists shy, 1 assist, 2 rebounds shy of doing that.
Well, Chris, you said it earlier. Would we be talking more about this had Russell Westbrook not done what he's done over the last 2 years? And he's kind of normalized a triple-double. In this era, we've seen guys like LeBron James, like Russell Westbrook, like a Ben Simmons that can come out, even a James Harden, that can come out night in and night out and get their team's defensive rebounds, assists, and points. And, you know, he is 21, 22 years young. I think he might be younger than that. And we're judging a guy that is basically putting up outstanding numbers on what he can't do instead of what he can. He can get to the basket at will. And Philly is still trying to figure it out. I mean, they had a run last year in the playoffs, in the postseason, but they're still trying to balance how they're going to play Embiid and Simmons together. Yeah,
and more importantly, I mean, his assists are down a tick, but everywhere else across the board, he's up slightly. And more importantly, he's becoming a better player. And I think it's very true that the best players are the guys who understand who they are and play to their strengths. And the point I made about, you know, they didn't draft him. You see it all the time. Guys will come in, they drafted you because of what you do well, not because of what you might do. You know, you've shown an ability by being the #1 overall pick that you have special skill set. And that's what he's established. The other thing that's really impressive that gets lost in all this, they won a playoff series in his rookie year last year. And he was an integral part of that. And generally with younger players, even if they have statistical success, they don't necessarily translate that into wins and losses early in their career. You look at the last 2 rookies of the year prior to him, they're in Minnesota. They weren't sniffing the playoffs until they made that trade to get Jimmy Butler. So for him to do what he did that first year with that young upstart group, getting them in the postseason, winning a first-round series, that bodes really well for their development as a core group moving forward.